Companies are training people to buy for price and not for quality. My goodness, what a true statement that is. I'm borrowing this from my stateside colleague, Kaz Murray, who heard it from a sales manager she talked to recently. And, when it comes to small items like clothing or groceries, the costs are still contained. And although it does upset you, one can handle it. But when it comes to your big ticket items like houses and cars or hiring decisions and appointments in an organization, it becomes extremely costly very quickly. I'm thinking here of a client that I'm working with at the moment who in the last year appointed someone in one of their key leadership positions in the organization. And it literally was clear to them from the first day that person started that he was not a fit for the role at all. And culturally, he would never fit into that organization. They ended up needing to pay quite a large sum in severance pay to him after a few short months in the role, and they lost all of their recruitment fees on it because they only had a 3-month guarantee on the placement from the agency that they worked with on that. So overall, this cost them a lot more just in rands and cents or in costs specifically that they could quantify. But of course, there are a lot of other costs, as I've referred to previously, also in terms of team morale, in terms of the upset that it causes in the environment, and all those kind of things, which is more difficult to calculate. I mean, people who have done studies around this has found that mishires at the more junior levels cost you literally 3 times an annual salary. And when it gets to your senior and executive levels, it can go up as high as 15 times annual salary when there is a mishire in a company. This is supported actually by studies that I refer to very frequently. There's that leadership IQ study that they did a few years back. It was done over 3 years with more than 5,000 hiring managers, more than 20,000 positions. So it really was a very solid study. And the outcomes showed that 46% of new hires are mishires, and it shows up within 18 months or less. And of the remainder, 35% is either B or C players, so they don't shoot the lights out, but they can at least do the job. And there's only 19% that really is a proper success in the role that they are placed in. So it's very costly, these mishires. Most mishires become very evident quite quickly. From appointment date. So it doesn't take 18 months to see that someone is really not the right appointment in a role. So you want to make sure that you do everything you can up front to rather find the right people and to run a very careful and in-depth process so that you really minimize the risk of making a mishire. Just as a matter of interest, I mean, other studies that support this is a study that was done by the Corporate Leadership Council, where they looked specifically at executive hires, and it showed exactly the same results. Nearly 50% of executive hires proved to be mishires within an 18-month period. And also there was a study done by the Harvard Business Review where they looked at management level hires. And again, there's somewhere between 40 and 60% of management hires also proved to be mishires within 18 months or less. All of this brings me also to another statement that one of my mentors often makes, and he says that if you make your decisions on money alone, you will be wrong 99% of the time. Unfortunately, I myself have been guilty of that more times than I care to remember, and it's always cost me a lot more in the long run. I'm thinking here also now of a situation that I'm dealing with a client who appointed someone who wanted to appoint someone in a new role in the organization. They went to market, actually found someone who was a great fit culturally, great fit from a skills perspective and experience perspective for the role, but she wanted more than what they could offer. And in the end, through all of the negotiations, the deal fell through. So I'm thinking here, if there is any way that you could stretch a little bit more, whether it be through a retention bonus, a sign-on bonus, and you can tie them in for a period of time, it will cost you less to bring that little bit of extra money to the deal, even if it's not in a month-to-month salary, because I understand sometimes it has to do with levels in organizations. You can't push beyond a certain level. But if you think of creative ways, maybe even project bonuses that you could put in place to make it more attractive for such an individual, it will still cost you less, if possible, to bring that individual on board and know you have the right hire for the position than to bring in a second tier individual, a B or a C player, and they really are not doing anything great in the role. Interestingly enough, that same client came to me, and this is why I know about this story, because they wanted me then to recruit for this role for them and see who I could find in the market. And through the negotiations, we couldn't agree on the fee because our process is much more in-depth. And so it is a little bit more costly, not massively more costly, but if you talk about 3 to 5% more on recruitment fees, compared to what their normal contingency agencies are asking versus the quality and the depth of the process that we offer, and making sure that you get the right hire on board, but you've got someone that stays on board for a long time, and you've got a much longer guarantee period, up to a 1-year guarantee period, you really are safeguarding yourself from additional costs along the line. But they at that point could not see that and wasn't in a mindset to actually follow with it. So I'm not sure what the update is on the position, whether they have come right to find someone. But these are just things that we come across in our day-to-day work. So having said all of this, what could maybe make sense to you is to look at an engagement fee when you do work with your headhunters or your senior recruitment consultants. So what an engagement fee in essence means is that you would be paying, let's call it a deposit amount upfront, which normally would be in the region of about 25 to 30% of the actual placement fee or the estimated placement fee. And that portion then secures the business of the recruiter. So it means they can really prioritize your search and give it all the time that it takes, because to run a proper in-depth process, to work through all of the referrals and all the layers of people who need to refer to find the right candidates simply takes time and is costly on our side to do that in-depth process. It can certainly be done. But if you are putting someone in competition with 5 or 10 other agencies and you think they are going to be able to spend the time with a 10% chance or a 20% chance to place the position, it simply is not worthwhile for them financially to go and put everything else on hold and to search for just that one position. So if you give them more security and more trust in the process, and they can then afford to prioritize that search for you, then in the end, you can get to the results that you really do want to get to. We're working with exactly that at the moment. One of my clients, we're working on an engaged search for them on quite a senior level role. And there's some history to the role. So there's sensitivities that we need to manage very carefully. And we have, in the end, identified 3 very strong candidates for them for the role. 2 of those fell through shortly before the interviews took place. And it's something outside of our controls. We're working with variables on all sides of the process, so things can happen that no one expected to happen. And so there's only one person that they can take through the process at the moment. But we are already back in there, diving deeper, going further, seeing who we might have missed or not considered on the first round, who else we can get in touch with, who else can be referred to us. And so they know this position will be placed, even if it does take a little bit longer, but the work still continues until the role is placed. And for us, it's worth it because we know that business is secure, and it is worth it to spend all that time until we find exactly what they need for the role. And, it is less costly, obviously, than if you go on a full retained search, which also has its place, but there you would be paying a third upfront. You would be paying a third after the shortlist is submitted to you, and then the final third on acceptance of the offer or placement of the candidate. So this is a good way that works in between the two, but you still get the full commitment of your recruiter on that role. And so maybe something you want to think of and see how you can incorporate that. It might be very worthwhile for your external searchers to look at something like that. But keeping in mind that if you are going to bring everything down to price alone, it might end up being way more expensive than you expected it to be down the line.